Hello and welcome to the Ireland on the Fly podcast about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland. This week I speak to Kevin McLoughlin, a lifelong angler from Cork who talks about growing up in Cork City and visiting family members out by Mallow to go fishing whenever he could. He remembers the good old days for salmon when the spring one was something to behold. And he also talks about moving to Cobh and even spending a year on the newly formed fisheries board in 1979. But before we hear from Kevin, Tom, look, the Blackwater fish kill, it's still like every other day there seems to be kind of new developments or movements on it. And it is something we're going to do an episode on, I think, in a couple of weeks when, I suppose really we're waiting on the report to come out on something that we can kind of concrete talk about and discuss. Because at the moment there's a lot of kind of, well, this happened and then there's counter stories to that. But I suppose the latest development really that we do know is that it is an irritant. It wasn't a fungal infection after all.
Yeah, it wasn't a fungal infection and it wasn't high water temperatures. You know, so it has been deemed that it is an irritant. So, but as you say, we'll wait until we hear more. And yeah, I'm looking forward to getting an episode done on this that we can talk more about it, because it's the biggest fish kill in the history of the state, and you know it's already last week's news.
So let me just go to, I'm just on the IFI website in terms of the last media release they have up on their website, which is from Saturday, the 30th of August, which is Minister Dooley notes publication of further reports and test results for River Blackwater. Dooley has noted the publication of reports detailing monitoring and testing. The report includes results from the Marine Institute diagnostic tests with updated virology results. They also include EPA lab tests and site visiting monitoring reports. At the Minister's direction, IFI, Cork County Council, EPA, Marine Institute and ISCA Éireann met during the week to progress and advance the ongoing investigation. IFI is liaising closely with all state bodies on the matter and continues to update the Minister and officials. All 5 state agencies will meet again early next week. That just gives you such hope, doesn't it? It also occurred to me, so I think it was one of the comments I read, I think it might have been on our own post, in relation to Minister Dooley, the same Minister of State Timmy Dooley, who was, during the summer, wasn't he, photographed at the fish farm, proclaiming the beauties and wonders and brilliance of farm salmon.
Oh, I missed that one. Are you serious? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure.
That's
big,
it.
Big fan of the wild fish.
Yeah, that's it. Concerned about the wild fish, eh?
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, always take anything they say with a pinch of salt.
Yeah.
So
and I think the thing there that there's 5, you know, that the 5 agencies have to meet. Yeah. God.
Oh, yeah. And if they don't have the font in the right colour or the right size, they have to call a halt to proceedings and then they have to meet again.
As this goes on, it fades into people's memories. And as I said, it's last week's news, it's going to be last month's news, and it just goes on. And the only people who seem to be concerned about it is anglers. But, I mean, you know, we've said it before, and we'll say it again, rivers, lakes of Ireland are the lifeblood of this country. They're not just for anglers, you know? Mm-hmm. And, you know, if people want to let them become poisoned and become open sewers, well, I don't know.
I think just judging by the anger that I get from kind of the angling community, I think a lot of the anger is being directed at IFI in terms of their initial response and their initial, what seemed to be downplaying it and not being on top of it, not leading the way in terms of, you know, fighting for the anglers on this issue, you know, and just kind of just being another state quango.
Or fighting for the fish, as we said beforehand, you know, fighting for the fish. You know, this is devastating fish kill.
Yeah,
and you know, it wasn't exactly a very strong response.
Yeah,
you know, it was kind of wait and see what you know, because the weather's been warm.
Yeah, you know? Exactly, which we're hearing contrary reports to, obviously.
You'd like something really firm, something strong, something's afoot here. This looks disastrous. This looks really bad. We have to get to the bottom of this quick and find out, is there somebody or something at fault for this? And if there is, we've got to find out what, who, whatever they are.
Yeah, but just stop being so wishy-washy.
Yes, yeah.
You know? I think I saw another comment as well. Somebody was asking, why on earth did it take 24 hours before the IFI sent somebody out to the water to sample it?
Yeah.
24-hour delay.
Yeah. So
Like
that, but
that's
like, this is like, as we were saying as well, we need to get all of these facts. And that's why I'm looking forward to doing the episode on this,
yeah, yeah.
because, there's a lot of stuff been thrown out there. We need to get all of these done. And so hopefully, as soon as we hear more and
Yeah.
the five government bodies converge and come out with something that we can, because at the moment, the great Irish saying, Dúirt span lum, Gurúrt span lay. Do you know that one?
No.
Dúirt span lum, Gurúrt span lay. A woman said to me that a woman said to her, right?
Oh,
Okay. And it's until we have something written in stone and we have a proper report and that we can deal with, and then we can talk about it.
yeah. Well, look, we'll definitely delve into more on this, and we will spend a special episodes on it. In the meantime, I actually would direct people to Ronan Collins, friend of the show,
Oh, yeah,
who
yeah,
is also
great
on the
piece.
board of Sandwich Ireland, and he wrote an excellent piece. It's on the journal.ie. Kind of summing up a lot of, I suppose, the issues we've talked about in terms of the importance of water quality, the importance of rivers, importance of fish, not just from an angler's perspective,
Mm.
and the pressures it's all being put under, and the lack of action, and the kind of ongoing fish kills and pollution and all that kind of stuff. So, well worth the read. So, look, we will
Yeah,
come back to this, and yes, let's hope it's not being another can being kicked down the road in
yeah.
relation to that. Back to the fishing, Tom. How's it been last few weeks in Carrib? Again, we're going to probably do an episode soon enough, just in kind of the late season on the locks.
Yeah, yeah, hopefully we'll
How's it
do that
been?
because there's still a bit, well, as we talked, depending on where you are, is the last 12 days on other lakes.
Yeah,
But,
yeah, yeah.
so we have a month and a bit, just less than a month. So hopefully, thinking of next week, we'll do a bit on end of season locks, just to do that. But, right, at the moment, we had a deluge of rain here over the weekend, which was probably needed, but put the lake up vertically at my own place here. I can see it's up 6 inches, 15 centimeters,
Bloody
right?
hell.
And that's in 3, 4 days. So it's shot up.
Yeah.
Fishing was quite good beforehand. After the heat wave was tough, the middle of August, but I picked up and I found a few fish out in deeper water, which is always nice here. Deeps in Carrib is funny because, like, the lakes that you have the deeps in generally are Melvin and Mask, and they're
Hmm.
smaller fish. There is deeps fishing in Lough Erne, which I've never done, so I can't say too much. But I believe the bitter fish do come up here there as well. But like on Corrib last week, we'd fishing out right in the open water and water that was probably 60, 70 foot depth. We had fish to 3 pounds. It's great
Lovely.
stuff. Yeah, yeah. But the thing is, they don't tend to stay as long on Corrib. Yeah, so like to be honest with you, go back in a couple of days and there isn't diddly there. So you got to
Nice.
strike while the iron is hot. And what has happened, of course, the level of the lake rose. And last couple of days, I've visited those places, and never a sign, not a sign of a fin. But at least we managed to hit them when they were there. So what always happens with the rising lake is really turns the fish off. So last couple of days have been slow. It's not been disastrous. You'll move fish, but it seems to upset them. Whether it's something to do with the change in water pressure on the lake when it rises, whether it's the influx of a different temperature water from the runoff. I don't know, but it does affect them. I speak of that from personal experience.
Hmm.
Anytime I've seen the lake rising sharply, I found it tough.
Yeah, any sharp change of conditions, anything, isn't it?
Yeah,
Like it
that's
does
it.
does put them off. Like,
That's
great.
it.
Well, look, it's just something we'll cover in more depth hopefully next week. And there is only a few weeks left in the season, so
Mhm.
do make the most of it if you can to get out. But look, let's get back to this week's guest anyway. Kevin McLoughlin on his, I suppose, fly fishing life since the 1950s. And I first asked Kevin about his love of fishing as a kid.
My mother came back from England and brought me with her, and so I arrived in Cork about 1954, and one of the first things I discovered is that we had fishing all over the place that we didn't have in London. So I was very pleased with that. But so I got to spend my youth fishing, and also my grandparents. My grandparents lived fairly close to the upper Blackwater, so I spent a lot of time up there. So I used to spend the summers then fishing the upper Blackwater, and later on, then I used to go. I used to go to for my fishing. And there was several stretches of river that I had access to. Down Ballydesmond, Bally Ballydorgan, sorry, which is about halfway between Fermoy and Lismore, just below the famous Carrysville fishery. So I had access to fishing there for several years. But the fishing I had up on the Blackwater, it was mainly during the summer, and you'd be talking about fish that have been up a long time because it's fairly well up the river. So they'd been, a lot of these fish had been in the river since February and March. So by the time they got up there, they were pretty brown, and they were also kind of challenging to catch too because the river in July would be kind of low, but there was plenty of fish. There was loads of fish, though. I mean, fishing in the 50s, I think, a little bit different from now.
Yes, exactly. And was it salmon you were mainly going after?
I used to go into salmon like when the day suited it, because I was fairly used to that. There were certain times of the day you then might have a goal, but for the rest of the time you'd be trout fishing. And dry fly, I fish mostly. And there was a few tributaries. One of them was the Araglan. I think the real name of it is the Own Tarraglan. It flows in just above Rathmore, and that had a huge population of very nice trout in it. And it's one of these, these slow meandering rivers that kind of go oxbow back on itself. And kind of deep. It was kind of dodgy river to fish because the bank would give away from you when you're walking along it, and you could find yourself in 5 or 6 feet of water. But it was. I used to have great dry fly fishing on it, and I remember one day parking my bike by there was a pool down from the road, and there was a cottage there, and it belonged to an old lady, and I put my bike up against the fence, and I knocked on the door, and she came out, and she said, would you mind if I went down your field to do a bit of fishing? She said, oh yeah. She said, not a bother. I said, wouldn't my bike be all right there? And she said, who's going to take it? This was the 1950s, and so anyway, I went down fishing, and I got a big bag of fish. And when I got, she said, is there fish still down there? I never knew that. She said, the last person that was fishing there, he was the captain in the Black and Tans. In other words, I was fishing over fish that hadn't been fished for 35 years.
My God. And tell me this, so would you get on the bike and would you cycle from Cork City out?
Well, when I was up the Blackwater, I was kind of staying locally, but I would kind of cycle up. I would cycle up to my grandparents or my uncles. So I had a string of uncles and aunts. My mother came from a fairly big family, So I have about 10,000 cousins, up around there, And they were all farmers, and they were all living along the Blackwater Valley, So it was very convenient for me that I had some base to work from.
Did many of them fish?
No. So nobody fished that time, outside the cities, and the angling centres. In rural Ireland, there was nobody. They used to think I was a bit tapped in the head. I say, has he got anything better to do with his time but dangling flies in the river, And it's like mad dogs and Englishmen, they were the only people that fished,
I suppose netting or poaching for salmon, maybe for the table, would that have gone on?
It would, yeah. There was always a bit of poaching during the winter, and it wasn't on a big scale. They'd take a couple of salmon there around Christmas time or something like that. You really spot fish. I'd say a lot of them were kelts or something like that, But it wasn't on a big scale. There wasn't. I don't remember them being organised gangs of poaching it wasn't a commercial enterprise, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
they would be really for the table, and the amount of salmon that were spawning, I don't think it made the slightest difference to the stock of fish anyway,
It is amazing though, I suppose, isn't it? The farmers were too busy working in the fields to be having time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is one of the things that I think I was talking to you earlier about it, was that I remember in that time about the late 40s, early 50s, I used to be back and forth at that time. There were a lot of farms that had these small little streams going through them. And a lot of those were vital to salmon fishing. They were feeder streams into the spawning reds. And all of those have gone now. You know, a lot of them only run now after heavy rain, because they went to this kind of mad making a butter mountain and a milk lake. You know, every bit of grass was valuable. So there was a hell of a lot of drainage went on in the 60s. And I remember my grandfather's farm, my uncles talking about that they used to catch salmon during the winter. I think it was a bit further down, but they said that they remembered the old people talking about that there's salmon spawning in this little stream at the bottom of the farm. If I go up to the farm now, that's dry land. That's what's happened to an awful lot of salmon fishing over the years is with drainage, is that the spawning area, and a lot of the big rivers is much reduced from what it used to be.
The maddening thing, I think, Kevin, as well, is you can kind of go, well, okay, maybe it was the 60s. They didn't know any better. It was all for the sake of progress and modernization.
Oh yes, and if there was a jobs involved, they'd build a factory for Agent Orange. They wouldn't be bothered,
Yeah.
I mean, the classic example that was Loch Ennell, was it Loch Sheelan and Loch Ennell? Two of the best brown trout lakes in the country, and then they nearly killed them stone dead with piggeries.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and I remember fishing there. I went with a friend one time, and the mayfly up there was unbelievable. It was like a blizzard.
But I'd argue now, though, Kevin, like 80 years later, you look at the fish kill in the Blackwater, biggest fish kill in the history of the state.
Yeah.
That has anything changed? Have we learned anything? We've had 30 fish kills in the last 2 years.
Not a great lot. No, not a great lot.
Yeah.
But the fishing in the 50s, when you're talking about salmon, up to about but the mid 1960s, you saw the last of the sort of the classic spring salmon fishing. It hadn't really changed much up until the 1950s, between that and the 1930s. I remember looking in Carrysville at the fishing records, and there wasn't a huge difference in the 1920s. There were some very big fishing years, back in the 1920s, right, around the formation of the state. But there were several years now. Funny now, I remember Stuart showing me the records that it's 1929, I think. There was a complete collapse of salmon returning, and they don't quite know why. They just didn't turn up. And the catches in Carrysville, and it was like shooting ducks in a barrel, like there in Carrysville. But they were down to almost zero, like in 1929 or something like that. But for no particular reason, But now we always know what it is. It's for a fish kill, or whatever, But this seemed to be something that happened at sea or whatever. They just didn't come back.
That's the thing about the salmon back then. You would have the fluctuations. You would have bad years and good years.
Yeah,
but now it's just a slide down every year.
It's a gradual slope down, and that started. I'll tell you, it started UDN disease, 1962. And that was a really sad period. I mean, and it seemed to be it was a cold water disease, and it seemed to attack all the bigger fish more so than the smaller fish. And it was quite usual to arrive in the river and see an 18-pound fish idling in the shallows alongside, complete blind and completely covered in white slime and kind of like fur growing out of them. It was, and then the following day you'd see it corpse at the bottom of the river. It was absolutely desperate. And I remember the weir in Fermoy. They were just piled up on the weir, and loads of big salmon, spring salmon. This was early near February, March, April, and it was, there was anglers there nearly in tears.
Who taught you fly fishing?
No one, I tell you. You didn't have YouTube that time, you know. You had to go down. You had to go to the library. You got a book out that had been printed in 1893 or something like that, from somebody, Jock Scott in Scotland or somebody like that, you know. And so you had to learn the hard way, like, you know. And you'd meet the occasional angler that would put you straight. I remember when I was fly fishing. One of the best bits of advice he got me. I was trying to fly fish, you see, and I thought I knew what I was doing. And he said, "You're doing it all wrong, boy." So he said, "Did you ever whitewash?" He said, "A stone wall," and I actually had in the farm in my grandparents' farm, like that. You had to get whitewash in and a big brush and flick it at to get the paint to hit the wall, to get the whitewash to hit the wall. And actually, that wrist action of the flick is actually pretty similar to your forward cast, with it, especially with a trout rod. Like. And that was one of the best advice that I got. But I mean, but you just picked it up as you went along, right? But there was nobody really to show you, unless you were up in Oughterard or somewhere where there was a tradition of fly fishing going way back to Victorian time, and the rest of the country you were flying by the seat of your pants, like.
So what made you take up fly fishing? Would it not have been easier to go worming or spinning, or so what made it fly fishing?
I used to do a bit of spinning, but I liked fly fishing. I liked the whole idea of fly fishing, and I always considered real fishing much more so than spinning. I always thought spinning was a bit more mechanical, like it's also very skillful fishing as well. But there's something about fly fishing. It's something like, more like archery. Like it's a kind of a skill that you have to hone over a long period of time. Like, I don't know who thought it up at the first day. I wonder who. It goes right back 300-400 years. Like, but
yeah,
I wonder who thought it first was a good idea to flick a fly out.
yeah, especially when you think about it, like especially for salmon fishing, we're trying to catch a fish that doesn't eat in the water, like, and we're trying to put a
Yeah, and he's not rising to take flies in the first place.
yeah, exactly. It seems completely daft. So tell us this, Kevin. You moved to Cobh then, so you got involved with the fishing industry. Tell us about that.
Yeah, but when I went to Cobh, I was kind of at a loose end at the time in terms of what I was going to do or what I was going to do. But I kind of went fishing with the lads, and I got into it myself, and I sort of, you can't beat them, join them. Like, so I sort of packed up my other job. I was actually working in photography at the time, and I was kind of getting a bit fed up with it, because I'd been working in London prior to that, and I wasn't doing the same kind of work that I was doing in London. So I was getting a bit fed up of that. So I went fishing instead. That suited me better. And I was also got involved in boat building and stuff like that at the time. So I got to do a crash course in boat building and net making and all sort of stuff like that. And I kind of got into the fishing. But then all of a sudden, someone has suggested to me that were telling me about the large catches of sand that they used to have in Cork Harbour, prior to the hydroelectric scheme. But what I did know was that the grills were still running. They were still running because I think they were kept going by the 2 or 3 tributaries that were below the dams. Like, so there was a stock of fish there running, and also I knew, well, I'd have to go back for it. But when I was living in Cork, they called me. The ASB called us one day because I was a member of I was on the committee of one of the local salmon clubs, and they announced that because the run of salmon had failed completely when they opened the dam, it went from something like 14,000 down to about 109 or something colossal like that. I'm not what the exact figure is, but that was the one I always remember them quoting to me over those. So I assume it's fairly accurate. But anyway, we were called to this meeting, and they were announcing that they were going to opening a new type of hatchery, which we weren't terribly impressed with the idea of opening a hatchery, because hatcheries didn't have a particularly good name in terms of restocking at the time. But they were going to rear smolts, the silver stage, and then release the smolts. And it was actually not going to be salmon farming in the trade, it was going to be salmon ranching. So you release the smolts, and the smolts go off to sea. So their entire adult life is at sea. So I thought that was a very, very interesting project. And I thought, we're going to be, now we go back to when I was in Cobh. The lads were telling me, when the fishermen were telling me, some of the older lads, that the grills were still running. Now, where I was living in Cobh, I could see them jumping during the summer months. There's a couple of the beach there, and when you'd be taking a walk with the dog, you see them jumping. And say, "Oh, they're still there." So I remembered about in 1967 when they opened the smolt hatchery. I said, "I wonder, are they coming back?" So I made a draft net. I took out a draft net license, and we started fishing. And lo and behold, I was catching salmon, and quite a few of them. And a lot of them were fin clipped. In other words, they were coming from this experiment that the ESB were doing, and it was immensely successful. It was working very well, but they didn't seem to be terribly interested in the idea. They were kind of half interested in the thing, because basically the ESB are there to generate electricity. The hatchery is just something that they were required to do to maintain, some kind of a run of salmon. And I think once they got it going, the lads that were operating just operated, and they let them at it. And another thing that was happening was that I used to say to other fishermen, "Did you catch any fin clip fish?" And they'd say, "Not at all, no, we didn't." And then I'd go over to the boat, and the first fish that I had on top there with a fin clip missing, the fin missing. So I said, that's one. And what it was is it's a little, is it the antiposed fin, the one that's straight in front of the tail, the fleshy fin is gone. Now, in fairness to the fishermen, they wouldn't notice that. They catching a salmon, they wouldn't notice it anyway. And I say what was happening in the early part of the year is an awful lot of the returns that were coming at that time were totally unreported. I think they thought it wasn't working as well as it was working. Because I got an extraordinary number of them. I had to say to my lads, one of my lads is still vertical. I was talking to him about a couple of years ago, and he was having an argument inside the pub about salmon fishing, and I just kind of butted, and I said, do you remember all those fin clip fish that we used to catch in the 70s? "Oh, I do," he said, because I used to annoy him. I said, "Is he clipped?" But anyway, he said, "Yeah, I do." He said, yeah. Well, I said, "Forget all that." I said, because we imagined it, because no one told us at any time talking about it. That doesn't work.
Do you think there's a need to kind of bring it back? Like,
it's a sort of a thing. There's no substitute for a wild fishery and a wild spawn. There is no substitute. I know that from brown trout fishing. There's no substitute. When brown trout go down, you have to kind of do a major jobs on the actual habitat. Restocking doesn't seem to work. But when you're talking about silver smolts, that's a whole different ballgame, because the habitat is the ocean. All you have to do is rear them to the smolt stage, and as protected environment is fine. But where you're talking about wild trout, you have to look after the habitat. And where the smolt release comes is if your river has gone down for whatever reason, that there are no salmon coming back. That's your last resort if you want to have salmon at all. And that was my argument. And the proof of that is the Ranga River in Iceland, which is the most successful river in Iceland. And that's maintained entirely from smolts, silver smolts that are released. But I was told it doesn't work. No, I saw it working. And I had the money in the bank to prove it.
Did you keep doing the netting for a couple of years then?
I
Did you,
did
Kevin?
that for about 7 years, or 7 or 8 years. Then I went down West Cork, and I was working in West Cork at a boat yard, and a different job, like,
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
I used to do art for about June, July, part of August.
Wow.
Do okay, I was do extremely well, actually. Keep the wolf from the door. Like.
It seems to be so many problems out at sea now as well, isn't it? Between climate change and overfishing and all that. Like,
I don't know what the effort is like off of the Davis Straits now. I think they had some agreement that they'd reduce that fishery to. There was another fishery, of course, started up in Norway. You see, also that was another one. Is that they discovered that there was an endless supply of northern shrimp, which is a staple diet of the salmon. They had to reduce that fishery because they were getting worried about the stock of northern shrimp. Now, that was a staple diet of the spring fish line. So everything was at them since the 1960s on, like. And I remember I was in Norway, what was it, 1980s, and they were actually building trawlers at the time that the entire bow section was kind of reinforced down at the waterline for ice breaking. So they were actually trawling through the ice after the northern shrimp, and that's where the salmon are feeding.
it's difficult times, isn't it? Because you have an increased population, more pressure on water systems, infrastructure, more houses are needed, more development needed. And then at the same time, they're saying we need to go back to rewilding.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's a contradiction in terms. That's what I'm saying. As you say, it puts a challenge on fishery boards. I mean, it needs a lot of other experts or skills involved, to handle what they're. Otherwise, it's a whole lot of people arguing among themselves, different bodies arguing about, oh no, that's not in the interest of what we're doing, and so they'll have to encompass a lot more people. It should be part of the overall planning of the country. Like.
Did you give up the salmon fishing or?
I did, yeah. I did, yeah. Once I moved away from the river, like, I kind of, when I couldn't kind of grab 10 minutes here or half an hour there, I kind of lost a bit of interest in it then. And then I was too busy doing other things anyway, But I did, yeah. I kind of, but Richie got me into saltwater fly fishing now 12, 13 years ago. And I never ever even I didn't even thought of even trying it, but I got kind of fond of it there. I mean, it was Richie and Jock, a South African friend of ours, Jock Bronkhorst. We do a lot of fishing together, and we had some good days out. It was a good fun. Well, the one thing I enjoyed though was the mullet fishing. I did enjoy that. That's another fish now, like the bass, that needs serious protection, because they're extremely slow growing, and if there's any exploitation of them at all, there's no commercial fishery now to compensate. I mean, any fisherman that tells you they earn their living out of, catching mullet is telling porky pies, like, and more about it. Like, so there's no fisherman to compensate with, protecting the mullet, and doing exactly the same as they did with the bass. And I'll make it prohibited net them and whatever. Have so many, you can only have so many of them. Should be the order with mullet, because they are a really good angling species. That's worth looking after. And God, I remember Cork City when I was a kid. God, you could walk on the mullet. It was unbelievable. And big mullet, like, If we still had them, they'd be flying in droves to be fishing.
And isn't it funny? Like, people never fished for them. It's only in the last few years.
No, they didn't. No. And that's what I say, but don't hold your breath there, because I mean the TV chefs now are I remember used to go on television sometime, Sky, and you'd be flicking through, and there'd be 4 or 5 cookery programs, and they were all cooking bass And you're wondering, so that half of England then would go to the fishmonger looking for bass the following day. So that's where the market was coming from. Well, I fished it on one day, and they were all talking about grey mullet. So that's the next species that come under threat.
Yeah. And what is it about the mullet that you like? Is it a bit like trout fishing in many ways? Is it?
Yeah, it is. It's a bit like kind of a cross between. It's a cross between kind of dry fly fishing and nymph fishing, you know. In fact, that's one of the things I spotted straight away. That a good way to go at it is work it with an indicator rather than trying to strain your eyes, trying to look at a fly and watching watching for the slightest movement. But if you approach it as if you're going nymph fishing, it becomes a good sport then. Because they fight like hell.
Tell us this, Kevin. You've had many, many days fishing. Any memorable fish on the fly that stand out for you?
Oh, cripes, yeah, I've had fish up. I had fish up to 20. I had to fish 29 pounds. It's actually 30 pounds because I didn't weigh him till the following day. So he had lost a couple of pounds of weight. But I had a fair few fish over the 20 pounds on the fly. Yeah. But that was back when we had fish, you know. That wasn't terribly unusual, sort of in the late 50s and the early 60s, you know. And, you know, God, I mean, a 14-pound fish. I suppose the average spring fish was somewhere between 10 and 14 pounds. That would be the average size. I mean, the last time I saw a fish as big as that would be years ago. If you go to a fishmonger now, most fish up on the slab are only about 6 or 7 pounds weight, you know. It's a different experience now. Very seldom see big fish.
If you were 8, 9, it's unlikely you'd go out salmon fishing now, isn't it? Because it's just not there.
Yeah, it's just not there. Yeah, exactly. You know, you'd have to be going to somewhere like, you know, the Oranga River, or somewhere where you know you're going to get fish. You know, that's why I say is that it's an option that's worth looking at. I mean, I saw what they had one year there, 2010. They had 6,200 fish on the rods. You know, and the Oranga's not a big river. We're not talking about some gigantic river like the Shannon, you know.
So just finally, Kevin, looking to the future, do you think the decline of salmon is terminal?
I wouldn't think so, because they're a remarkably resilient fish. You know, I wouldn't think so. It would be terminal if they leave the rivers go below a certain point that it's so polluted. I tell you what gives great hope. There's a river in Denmark that they recently kind of brought back from the dead, again with smolt rearing, and they had the DNA of the original fish. Obviously, they'd kept track of something. And this river, which again is not a particularly big river, but it produces very big salmon. You know, a 20-pounder is nothing like on this river. And they managed to bring it back virtually from the dead.
Wow.
So I have great hopes that they're not going to disappear altogether, but it's going to take a hell of a lot of effort to bring them back. Yeah. You know, well, not a hell of a effort. I mean, this country has plenty of finances for all kinds of strange things, but you know, fisheries doesn't seem to be one of them.
And that is a question for another day.
For another day, yeah.
Kevin McLoughlin, it's been brilliant chatting to you. You've had a brilliant long fishing career from salmon to trout to mullet. So keep catching the mullet.
Funny thing, I don't consider the mullet much of a step down. You know, it's good fishing. It's really good fishing.
Well, Kevin, listen, it's been brilliant chatting to you. Thanks a million for joining us.
Okay, nice to talk to you. Thanks for asking.
Our thanks to Kevin for joining us on the show. And don't forget to rate, review and follow the Ireland on the Fly podcast on Apple, Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Plus you can keep up to date on IrelandOnTheFly.com as well as on Instagram, and myself and Tom will be back with another episode about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland.